Betrayal doesn't always knock. Sometimes it signs your name and quietly walks away with your house. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't even argue. I just stood there in that small courtroom, hands folded, listening to a young man I raised like my own son explain to a judge why my home now belonged to him. His voice was calm, confident, practiced, and every word cut deeper than anger ever could. People think betrayal comes with noise, with shouting, with drama. But this one came dressed in legal language and polite smiles. And that is what made it dangerous. I had taken him in when his father died. My brother. My only brother. A car accident on a wet highway. Gone in one night. The boy was 22 at the time. Still in college. Still lost. Still soft around the edges. He stood at my door with one suitcase and red eyes. I didn't hesitate. I told him, "You're home now." And I meant it. I gave him my spare room. I paid his tuition. I helped him find work. I introduced him to people. I stood behind him when he doubted himself. I corrected him when he was wrong. I protected him when life was unfair. I did what family does. Or what I believed family does. The house was never just a house to me. It was quiet, simple, paid off. The kind of place you build your life around. I had worked 30 years for it. Saved. Skipped vacations. Drove old cars. Said no to a lot of things. Because I believed in stability. In roots. In something solid that no one could take from you. I was wrong. It started small. Questions about paperwork. Curiosity about property taxes. Casual comments about future planning. I didn't see danger. I saw interest, responsibility, growth. I felt proud. That was my mistake. He offered to help manage things. Bills. Online accounts. Repairs. He said it was easier for him with technology. I agreed. I trusted. I stepped back. Slowly. Quietly. And that space is where he moved in. People assume betrayal looks evil. It doesn't. It looks helpful. It looks respectful. It looks like gratitude. I remember the day he asked about adding his name, just in case something happens. He said it was for emergencies. For hospital access. For protection. He said, "You're alone. I'm all you've got." And I believed him. Because I wanted to. The lawyer explained the documents later. The signatures. The transfer. The legal structure. I had signed without reading. I had trusted without checking. I had loved without limits. And in law, limits matter. By the time I understood, it was already his. He didn't throw me out. Not at first. He didn't need to. He just changed. Cold. Distant. Busy. Too busy. Conversations became short. Eye contact disappeared. The house felt different. Smaller. Like I was a guest in my own life. Then came the notice. Not from him. From the court. I read it 3 times before it made sense. Possession. Ownership. Right of residence. Legal standing. My name was missing. His was everywhere. When I asked him, he didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just said, "It's business. You'll be fine. You can stay for now." For now. That's when I understood. I wasn't family anymore. I was a phase. A stepping stone. A convenience. The courtroom was quiet. The judge was neutral. The law was clear. And the boy I once carried through grief now stood across from me as an opponent. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He already had what he wanted. People expect rage in moments like that. Screaming. Accusations. Collapse. But something else happened to me. Something colder. Quieter. More focused. I smiled. Not because I was happy. but because I was awake. When you've lived long enough, you learn something important. The loudest people are usually the weakest. And the calm ones, they're planning. I didn't fight him there. I didn't argue. I didn't expose him. I thanked the judge. I walked out. I let him think he had won. Because real revenge doesn't rush. It waits. Outside, he put his hand on my shoulder. Like careless. Like touching furniture. He said, "No hard feelings." I nodded. I even told him, "I understand." And I did. I understood exactly who he was. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from pain. From clarity. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one I had bought 20 years ago, and I made a list. Not of anger. Of facts. Of patterns. Of habits. Of weaknesses. Of people. Because when someone takes your house, they don't just take walls. They take safety, dignity, history. And I was not going to beg for any of that back. I was going to earn it. Quietly. Patiently. And when the time came, he wouldn't even see it. He thought he had outsmarted an old man. He had no idea he had just activated one. Betrayal doesn't ask for permission. It uses your kindness as the key. The first week after the court decision, he acted normal. Too normal. Friendly. Polite. Almost gentle. It was the kind of behavior that tries to erase guilt by pretending nothing changed. But everything had changed. He started locking his door. He stopped asking where I was going. He began inviting people over without telling me. Strangers. Laughter I didn't recognize. Voices that didn't belong in my home. Or what used to be my home. One evening, I came back from a walk and found my favorite chair missing. The one near the window. The one where I drank my coffee every morning. I asked him about it. He said, "I moved it. It didn't fit the new layout." The new layout. That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't about furniture. It was about control. Little by little, I was being edited out. My pictures came down. My books were boxed. My tools disappeared. My space became smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the house was slowly pushing me toward the door. I didn't confront him. I observed. That's what age teaches you. When something feels wrong, you don't rush. You watch. And what I saw was discipline. Planning. Calculation. He wasn't impulsive. He was methodical. Which meant this wasn't sudden. It was prepared. I remembered the nights he asked about my finances. The days he offered to organize my files. The times he said, "Let me handle it." The way he positioned himself between me and the world. I had mistaken control for care. That's another thing betrayal teaches you. The difference between support and possession. One afternoon, he came home early. Sat across from me. Folded his hands like a businessman. He said, "We should talk about your future." Your future. He spoke slowly. Carefully. Like explaining something to a child. He mentioned assisted living. Smaller places. Easier maintenance. He said it was for my comfort. He said, "This house is too much for you." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The boy who once cried in my arms. The man now measuring me like an expense. I said nothing. Silence is powerful. People talk more when you don't interrupt. He filled the space with words. With logic. With concern. With fake kindness. He told me he had options. Plans. Connections. He was already 3 steps ahead. He didn't ask what I wanted. He told me what would happen. And that's when I knew. He wasn't taking care of me. He was managing me. That night, I went through my memory like files. Every interaction. Every request. Every helpful gesture. Patterns appeared. Too clean to be coincidence. People think old men are slow. But slowness is often just patience in disguise. I remembered the lawyer he recommended, the accountant he insisted on, the online account he set up for me. All roads led through him. I had become dependent without realizing it. That is the most dangerous kind of trap, the one that feels comfortable. He began bringing up deadlines, paperwork, appointments. I missed one meeting on purpose, just to see. He reacted fast, sharp, irritated. The mask slipped for half a second. That's when I saw it. Fear. Not of losing me, of losing control. Control is everything to people like him. So I gave him more of it. I became quieter, more agreeable. I asked for help. I thanked him. I let him feel powerful. I let him feel smart. I let him think I was shrinking. Because when someone believes they've already won, they stop guarding the door. Inside, I was building something. Not anger. Not revenge. Structure. I called an old friend. Not about him. About records. About property history. About trusts. About mistakes people make. I asked questions without names. Without context. I listened. I learned. I learned that ownership isn't always power. And power isn't always visible. I learned that people who rush usually leave fingerprints. And he was rushing. One morning, I found a folder on the table. Open. Careless. He had forgotten it. Inside were documents. Copies. Plans. Timelines. My name was mentioned like a liability. Like a problem to be managed. I didn't touch it. I didn't read it. I photographed it. Then I put it back exactly where it was. That's another lesson. Never let them know you know. He came home later. Picked it up. Didn't even check. Because he didn't see me as a threat. He saw me as furniture. Part of the house. Something that came with the property. And I let him. People often ask later, why didn't you stop him sooner? The answer is simple. Because stopping him would have warned him. And warning him would have protected him. I wasn't here to stop him. I was here to end him. Not physically. Not violently. Socially. Legally. Strategically. In the calmest way possible. The night before he filed the next motion, he cooked dinner. For the first time in weeks. He smiled. He poured wine. He talked about work. About his plans. About his future. Not ours. His. I listened. I nodded. I congratulated him. I told him I was proud. And he believed me. That's the problem with people who betray quietly. They assume quiet people are weak. They forget that silence is not empty. It's loaded. When I went to bed, I didn't pray. I didn't hope. I didn't wish. I planned. Because when someone uses the law to hurt you, the law is also where you hurt them back. And I was about to remind him of something he had forgotten. He wasn't the only one who could read. Betrayal doesn't end when they take from you. It ends when they realize they misjudged you. He thought I was defeated. That was his first mistake. The second was underestimating how much an old man can remember when he's finally given a reason to. I started noticing things he didn't think I could see. The way he checked his phone when I entered the room. The way he lowered his voice when he took calls. The way he closed his laptop just a little too fast. These weren't habits. They were defenses. He had built a life on secrecy. And secrecy is heavy. It slips. One afternoon, he brought someone home. A woman. Well-dressed. Confident. The kind who asks questions without sounding curious. She looked at the walls. The windows. The layout. She didn't look at me. That told me everything. She wasn't there for dinner. She was there for evaluation. He introduced me like an object. This is him. Not uncle. Not family. Just him. She nodded, smiled politely, and continued measuring. That's when I understood the timeline. He wasn't planning to keep me. He was positioning me. Temporary. That night, I went into my room and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Not in fear. In calculation. Because there is a moment in every betrayal where pain becomes clarity. And clarity is dangerous. I remembered a conversation from years ago. A casual one. About inheritance. About contingencies. About just in case. He had laughed then. Said it was unnecessary. He said, "Nothing's going to happen to you." He was right. Nothing was going to happen to me. Everything was going to happen to him. I started organizing my days around him. Not to follow him. To understand him. His schedule. His habits. His blind spots. The times he was careless. The times he felt powerful. Power makes people sloppy. He began talking about renovations. Big ones. Expensive ones. He said it was an investment. He said it would raise the value. He said it was for the future. Not my future. I asked where the money was coming from. He said he had arrangements. That word again. Arrangements. The favorite word of people hiding things. I nodded. I thanked him. I let him explain. I let him feel superior. Inside, I marked the lie. He started pushing me out of conversations. Making decisions without me. Scheduling workers when I was out. Changing things without asking. Every change was a message. You don't belong here anymore. So I made my own changes. Quiet ones. Invisible ones. The kind that don't announce themselves. I opened a new account. In my name only. I contacted people he didn't know. I asked questions without context. I requested copies. I requested history. I requested trails. And slowly, a picture formed. He wasn't just taking the house. He was building on it. With money that wasn't clean. With paperwork that wasn't solid. With confidence that wasn't earned. That's when I smiled for real. Because there is nothing more fragile than a plan built on shortcuts. One evening, he came home irritated. Something hadn't gone his way. He was sharp. Snappy. He dropped his keys too hard. He slammed a cabinet. He spoke to me like I was in his way. I didn't react. I just looked at him. And for a second, he hesitated. Because something in my eyes had changed. Not anger. Awareness. He recovered quickly. Laughed it off. Apologized. Said he was stressed. Said he didn't mean it. I said, "It's okay." It wasn't. But I needed him comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. That night, I heard him on the phone. Whispering. Urgent. Talking about deadlines. About pressure. About before he realizes. Before I realize. That sentence settled into me like stone. He wasn't just confident. He was racing. And people who race crash. The next morning, he left early. Forgot his laptop. Left it open. No password. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The screen showed enough. Names. Numbers. Messages. Threads that didn't belong. Connections that shouldn't exist. I memorized. Then I closed it. And I waited. Because the worst thing you can do to someone who thinks they're in control is let them keep thinking it. By now, he believed I was shrinking. Weak. Confused. Dependent. He believed time was on his side. Time was on mine. Every betrayal has a turning point. A moment where the balance shifts. He didn't know it yet, but we had just passed it. He had crossed from clever to careless. And careless people leave doors open. I walked through one. Slowly. Quietly. Without leaving footprints. He was about to learn a lesson that only experience teaches. You can take a man's house. You can take his trust. You can even take his dignity. But if you take his patience, you have no idea what you just unleashed. Betrayal feels heavier when it comes from someone you once protected. Before the court. Before the papers. Before the silence. There was a boy at my door with nothing but a suitcase and a face that didn't know where to go. His father had been my younger brother. Loud laugh. Big dreams. No fear. The kind of man who believed life would always give him more time. And then one night, on a wet road, time stopped. I got the call before sunrise. A voice I didn't recognize telling me things I didn't want to hear. Accident. Impact. Immediate. No suffering. They always say that. As if it helps. I drove to the hospital in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just drove. When you grow older, grief doesn't rush. It sits. It waits. The boy was in the waiting room. Alone. 22 years old. Too old to be held. Too young to be strong. He looked up when he saw me. His face collapsed. He stood. He walked. And he leaned into me like a child who had lost the world. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just held him. That's how it started. No plans. No discussions. No paperwork. Just a man and a boy and an empty space that needed filling. He came home with me that day. One bag. One jacket. One life on pause. The first weeks were quiet. He stayed in his room. I left food outside the door. I didn't push. I didn't question. Grief has its own language. You don't interrupt it. When he finally came out, he looked smaller. Thinner. Like part of him had stayed in that hospital. We talked about his father. Not much. Just small things. Habits. Stories. Jokes. The way he used to whistle in the kitchen. The way he never closed drawers. The way he said, tomorrow, like it was a promise. The boy listened. Smiled sometimes. Looked away often. He didn't ask to stay. He didn't have to. I cleared the spare room. Gave him fresh sheets. Bought him groceries he liked. Put his favorite cereal in the cabinet. These things seem small. They aren't. They tell someone they belong. And he did. At least I thought he did. He went back to college. I paid the fees. He worked part-time. I covered the rest. We didn't talk about it. Pride is fragile. I respected his. Some nights we ate together. Some nights we didn't. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we sat in silence. It was easy. Natural. No effort. He started calling me when he was late. Started asking before bringing friends. Started leaving notes. Be back soon. Working late. Thanks for dinner. It felt right. People told me I was kind. Generous. Noble. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as simple. He was family. That was enough. Over time, he grew. Stronger. Sharper. More confident. The sadness left his eyes. The hesitation in his voice disappeared. He started planning. Talking about the future. About business. About success. I was proud. I told him that. He smiled when I said it. The kind of smile that looks grateful. But doesn't last. I didn't notice then. Because when you love someone, you look for the good. Not the gaps. He got a better job. Then a better one. He dressed sharper. Spoke smoother. Walked differently. Success changes people. Not always for the better. He began offering to help. With bills. With repairs. With online things. He said, "You shouldn't worry about this stuff." I laughed. I said I was fine. He insisted. I agreed. That was the first shift. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just subtle. He started managing things. I started stepping back. He started deciding. I started trusting. We never argued, never fought, never raised our voices. That's why I didn't see danger. There were no cracks, no explosions, just quiet adjustments. Looking back, that's what hurts most. There was no warning, no cruelty, no disrespect, just distance. He stopped asking about my day, stopped sitting with me, stopped sharing. Conversations became functional, efficient, brief. Bills paid, work late, meeting, busy. Busy with what? I never asked. Because I didn't want to intrude. Because I didn't want to seem needy. Because I thought independence was respect. It wasn't. It was opportunity. One evening, I asked him how he was really doing. Not work, not money. He hesitated, just a second, then said, "Good," and changed the subject. That was the first time I felt it. The shift. The wall. I ignored it. Because you don't want to believe the people you save will one day leave you. And you never believe they will take something with them. We had routines. Coffee in the morning. News in the evening. He used to sit. Then he stood. Then he stopped. He started eating out. Coming home late. Bringing energy that didn't belong in the house. Different. Sharp. Restless. He spoke about people I didn't know. Places I hadn't heard of. Ideas that felt cold. Not bad. Just cold. He once said, "You think small." He laughed when he said it. Like a joke. I laughed too. But something in his eyes didn't. That's the thing about disrespect. It arrives smiling. I told myself he was young, ambitious, hungry. I admired it, encouraged it, supported it. I didn't realize I was teaching him how to step over me. Because kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's permission. And I had given him plenty. By the time the paperwork came, the control was already his. I just hadn't noticed the transfer. That's the quietest part of betrayal. It doesn't break in. It moves in. Betrayal grows best in places where gratitude once lived. He started calling the house ours. Not mine. Not his. Ours. It sounded generous. It wasn't. It was positioning. At first, it felt warm. Shared space. Shared responsibility. Family. I didn't challenge it. I didn't correct him. I didn't feel threatened. I had nothing to protect, or so I thought. He began rearranging things. Small things. The kitchen shelves. The garage. The cabinets. He said it was for efficiency. I believed him. He said, "Trust me." I did. Trust is easy when you're tired. And I was tired. Years of work. Years of responsibility. Years of being the steady one. When someone offers to carry weight, you let them. You should. That's what family is for. Or so I believed. He took over the bills. I didn't ask. He just did. He said, "It's easier online." He set up the accounts. He memorized the passwords. He told me not to worry. I stopped worrying. He paid on time. Everything ran smoothly. There was no reason to doubt. No missed payments. No warnings. No red flags. That's how manipulation works when it's done well. It doesn't create problems. It solves them. So you don't look closer. He started handling repairs. Calling contractors. Scheduling visits. I'd come home and find things done. Fixed. Cleaned. Improved. He'd say, "Don't thank me." I did anyway. He'd smile. Short. Controlled. Like someone who knew something I didn't. I should have asked more questions. But when life feels stable, you don't investigate stability. He talked about investments. About growth. About leverage. Words that sounded important. He said the house was an asset, not a home. An asset. That was the second shift. From emotional to financial. From family to strategy. He asked about my retirement, my plans, my savings. Not in a caring way. In a calculated way. Like filling in blanks. I answered honestly. Because I had no reason not to. One night, we sat at the table. He spread papers. Charts. Graphs. Projections. He spoke like a man with a future mapped out. He spoke like a man who didn't see me in it. He said, "You should think about efficiency." Efficiency. That word again. People who talk about efficiency usually mean control. He suggested simplifying things. Streamlining. Consolidating. He said it would protect me. He said it would make things easier. He used that phrase a lot. Easier. But easier for who? I didn't question him. I didn't resist. I didn't push back. I let him guide. I let him decide. I let him steer. Because I trusted the boy I had once held while he cried. That's the trap. We trust the memory, not the man. He began signing things for me. With permission. He said, "Just let me handle it." I nodded. I didn't read. I didn't verify. I didn't think. Because family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't plan. That's what I believed. He stopped asking my opinion. He started informing me. He'd say, "I did this. I changed that. I decided this." And I accepted it. Because conflict felt unnecessary. Because peace felt more important. Because I didn't want to create distance. I didn't realize distance was already there. He stopped telling me about his day. Stopped sharing his problems. Stopped seeking advice. He no longer needed me. He had outgrown me. Or so he thought. I noticed he never discussed his failures. Only his wins. Only his progress. Only his moves. People who hide their struggles are usually hiding more than pride. He got phone calls at night. Whispered. Stepped outside. Closed doors. I didn't follow. I didn't listen. I didn't intrude. Because I didn't want to be that man. The suspicious one. The insecure one. The old one. That's another mistake. When you're afraid of looking weak, you give power away. He once asked if I trusted him. I laughed. That should have been my answer. Instead, I said yes. He nodded. Like he was confirming something. Like he was checking a box. Then he smiled. That smile wasn't warm. It was satisfied. After that, things moved faster. Paperwork. Appointments. Meetings. He was always busy. Always in motion. Always one step ahead. He started talking about the house as if it were his. He said, "I'm thinking of upgrading. I might renovate. I want to increase value." He didn't say, "we." He said, "I." I noticed. But I said nothing. Because I didn't want to seem petty. Because I didn't want to seem territorial. Because I didn't want to seem afraid. So I stayed quiet. And silence can be mistaken for surrender. He brought in professionals. Lawyers. Accountants. Advisors. People who spoke his language. People who didn't look at me. They shook his hand. They listened to him. They took notes from him. They asked him questions. No one asked me anything. That should have hurt. It didn't. Not then. Because I still believed I was family. I still believed loyalty was mutual. I still believed gratitude had weight. It doesn't. Not to people who measure life in advantage. He once said, "You don't need to worry about anything. I've got this." I smiled. I said, "I know." And I meant it. That's the saddest part. I truly believed him. Betrayal feels slow when it's being built, and sudden when it's finished. By the time I sensed something was wrong, It had already been right for him for a long time. He stopped asking for permission. That was the shift. Not dramatic. Just final. He'd say, I scheduled this. I moved that. I decided this. No questions. No pauses. Just statements. And I let them pass. Because I didn't want tension. Because I didn't want conflict. Because I didn't want to feel old. He started talking about legacy. About building something bigger. About not wasting potential. He said things like, you played it safe. Not unkind. Not cruel. Just dismissive. As if stability was weakness. As if patience was failure. He began spending money. More than usual. New clothes. New gadgets. New habits. He said it was an investment in himself. I didn't challenge him. I admired his confidence. Confidence is attractive. Until it becomes entitlement. He once said, I wouldn't be here without you. I nodded. He didn't wait for a response. That's when I realized he wasn't expressing gratitude. He was closing a chapter. He brought home documents. Stacks of them. Left them on the table. He didn't hide them. He didn't explain them. He didn't need to. He assumed I wouldn't ask. And he was right. Because part of me still saw the boy, not the man. He asked me to sign things. Casual. Just here. And here. And here. He said it was for taxes. For efficiency. For protection. Protection. That word again. I signed. Without reading. Without checking. Without hesitation. Because family. Because trust. Because habit. I was not careless. I was comfortable. And comfort is dangerous. He stopped including me in decisions entirely. I'd find out after. He'd say, I meant to tell you. He never did. He began treating the house like a project, not a home. He talked about resale. About leverage. About timing. He said, it's just smart. I said nothing. Because I didn't want to sound small. Because I didn't want to seem attached. Because I didn't want to admit I was afraid of change. He once joked, you're stuck in the past. He laughed. I smiled. But something in me tightened. Because the past is where loyalty lives. And he had left it. He stopped coming home for dinner. Then stopped coming home on time. Then stopped coming home at all some nights. He said he was working. Networking. Building. I didn't question. Because I didn't want to sound needy. Because I didn't want to be a burden. Because I didn't want to be in the way. That's how you erase yourself. Quietly. He replaced things without asking. My chair. My lamp. My old radio. He said they were outdated. He said he was modernizing. I laughed. But I noticed. Because those things weren't furniture. They were me. He began locking his room. Then his office. Then the garage. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. Distance doesn't announce itself. It just closes doors. One evening, I asked him if everything was okay. He paused. Just a second. Then said, of course. But his eyes didn't match his words. That's when I knew. Not that something was wrong. That something was finished. He had moved on. And I hadn't. I started feeling like a guest. Not in a dramatic way. In a subtle way. Like someone who doesn't belong to the conversation. Like someone who doesn't fit the future. He spoke about plans that didn't include me. About trips. About moves. About opportunities. He never asked if I wanted to come. He assumed I wouldn't. And I didn't correct him. Because I didn't want to slow him down. Because I didn't want to hold him back. Because I still loved him. That's the cruel part. Love makes you generous with your own disappearance. He brought someone over once. a colleague. They spoke about business, about properties, about returns, about strategy. They didn't look at me. They didn't lower their voices. I wasn't part of the room. I was part of the furniture. I sat there, quiet, invisible, and I let it happen. Because I didn't want to make him uncomfortable. Because I didn't want to embarrass him. Because I didn't want to be the old man in the corner. That's how he learned. That I would move. That I would adapt. That I would not resist. And that's when he decided, not consciously, instinctively, that I was not an obstacle. I was a resource. He began speaking to me differently, more direct, less patient, less gentle. He interrupted me. He corrected me. He dismissed me. Small things, but consistent. Respect doesn't vanish. It's withdrawn. And mine had been. I told myself it was stress, pressure, ambition, youth. I made excuses for him. I protected him from my own doubts. Because I didn't want to believe the boy I saved would one day take something from me. Because that would mean my kindness had been misused. And I wasn't ready to face that. Not yet. So I stayed. Quiet. Supportive. Blind. And he built around me. Above me. Beyond me. And when the moment came, I was standing exactly where he needed me to be. Betrayal becomes dangerous when it stops hiding. The pressure didn't arrive loudly. It arrived politely. With paperwork. With smiles. With concern. He started asking about my schedule. Not casually. Precisely. What time I left. When I returned. How long I was gone. At first, I thought it was care. Then I realized it was mapping. He began suggesting changes. Not offering. Suggesting. Where I should park. Which room I should use. Which bathroom was more convenient. He said it was temporary. He said it was practical. It was territorial. One morning, I woke up to find my things moved. Again. Not rearranged. Relocated. My books were in boxes. My clothes shifted. My desk cleared. He said he needed space. Needed. Not asked. I looked at him. He avoided my eyes. That was new. Avoidance means guilt. Or strategy. Sometimes both. He began talking about efficiency again. About reducing clutter. About optimizing space. He used business language in a home. That tells you everything. Homes are for living. Projects are for control. He treated me like a variable. He started scheduling things for me. Doctor visits. Checkups. Consultations. He said it was for my good. I didn't argue. I attended. I listened. And I noticed. The questions they asked weren't about health. They were about capacity. About independence. About risk. I understood what he was building. A case. Not a plan. A case. He wanted proof. Proof that I was slowing down. Proof that I needed help. Proof that I shouldn't be in charge. That's how you take something from someone without touching it. You make them look unfit to hold it. I answered honestly. But carefully. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't minimize. I balanced. Because if someone is trying to measure you, you don't give them a straight line. You give them curves. He began pushing conversations. About the future. About what's best. About transitions. He said, we should think ahead. He used that word when it suited him. He talked about options. Facilities. Communities. Smaller places. Easier places. He framed it as comfort. As support. As kindness. It wasn't. It was positioning. He wasn't preparing for my future. He was preparing for my exit. I didn't challenge him. I asked questions. Not about his ideas. About his urgency. He avoided them. That told me enough. He became impatient. Shorter. Sharper. Less tolerant. He didn't hide it as well. The mask slipped. The tone changed. He spoke to me like a problem, not a person. He interrupted me, corrected me, finished my sentences, dismissed my opinions. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Disrespect doesn't need volume. It needs repetition. One afternoon, he said, "You don't really understand this stuff." I smiled, and that irritated him. Because people who want power don't like calm resistance. He began controlling access. To accounts. To information. To contacts. He said it was complicated. He said it was easier if he handled it. I agreed. Because I wanted him comfortable. Because comfortable people make mistakes. He started receiving mail in his name. To my address. Important mail. Official mail. I didn't open it. I didn't ask. I memorized the senders. That's enough. He brought home people. Professionals. Advisors. Strangers who spoke in low voices and looked at the walls. They didn't greet me. They didn't acknowledge me. I was not part of the discussion. I was part of the inventory. He began using phrases like, "when this is mine," and "after I take over." He didn't realize he was saying them out loud. Ambition makes people careless. One evening, he came home late. Agitated. Something hadn't worked. He snapped at me for nothing. A glass. A light. A door. I didn't react. I just watched. And he noticed. Because when someone expects submission and gets observation, they feel exposed. He recovered. Apologized. Blamed stress. Said he didn't mean it. I accepted. Because I needed him unguarded. He started rushing. That's when mistakes appear. Deadlines. Timelines. Pressure. He talked about dates. About filings. About before it's too late. Too late for what? He didn't say. He didn't need to. I could see the edge. He began treating the house like it was already his. He moved furniture. Repainted walls. Changed locks. Yes. Locks. I came home one day and my key didn't work. He laughed it off. Said there was an issue. Said he forgot to tell me. Said he'd give me the new one. He didn't. Not immediately. That pause told me everything. Because nothing says control like deciding who gets in. I didn't argue. I waited. Because waiting is louder than fighting. He began referring to me as him to others. Not uncle. Not family. Just him. Like I was a situation. That strips humanity. That makes things easier to take. I noticed the way he spoke about me when he thought I wasn't listening. Not cruel. Practical. Strategic. Like discussing logistics. That's when I knew. He wasn't struggling with the decision. He had already made it. I was in the way. And he was clearing space. He started pushing timelines. About moving things. About changing arrangements. About next steps. He didn't explain. He didn't consult. He informed. I let him. Because I wasn't ready to stop him. I was ready to understand him. And understanding is more powerful than resistance. I observed how he treated others. How he spoke to workers. How he negotiated. How he pressured. He liked leverage. He liked advantage. He liked control. That's a weakness. Because people who need control panic when they lose it. He didn't see me as a threat. That was his biggest mistake. Because I was watching. And when someone believes you're harmless, they show you everything. He showed me. Without knowing it. Betrayal shows its teeth when it no longer needs to pretend. The respect didn't disappear overnight. It thinned. Like air. Until one day, I noticed I was breathing alone. He began correcting me in front of people. Small things. Dates. Names. Details. He'd interrupt and say, "That's not right." With a smile. With confidence. With certainty. I let it go. Because I didn't want to embarrass him. Because I didn't want to seem sensitive. Because I didn't want to appear weak. And that taught him something. That he could. So he did. More often. Louder. Sharper. He started answering for me. When someone asked me something, he responded. When someone looked at me, he redirected. I wasn't part of conversations anymore. I was an accessory. He once said, "He doesn't really handle these things." Right in front of me. Like I wasn't there. I smiled. That confused him. Because people who push expect resistance. Not calm. He started leaving me out intentionally. Meals. Plans. Decisions. He'd go out and not mention it. I'd find out later. He'd say, "I didn't think you'd want to." He didn't ask. He assumed. That's how exclusion begins. Quietly. He stopped sharing anything personal. No stress. No worries. No doubts. Only achievements. Only wins. Only moves. That's not confidence. That's concealment. One evening, I overheard him talking about me. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Strategically. He said, "He's slowing down." He said, "He won't be able to keep up." He said, "It's better this way." Better for who? He lowered his voice when he realized I was near. That told me everything. He wasn't careless. He was calculating. He began limiting my access. To the car. To the garage. To the storage. He said it was for organization. For safety. For convenience. It wasn't. It was control. He installed cameras. Not for security. For observation. He said it was smart. He said it was modern. I didn't argue. Because arguing warns. And I didn't want to warn him. He once asked me if I remembered signing something. He didn't specify. He just asked. I said yes. He nodded. Like he was checking. Like he was confirming. Then he smiled. That smile again. Satisfied. He started talking about me in the past tense. He used to. He was always. He did. Not, he is. That's when you know someone has already moved on. He treated me like a chapter. Not a person. One day, he brought home a stack of boxes. He said, "We should start packing your things." Not if. Not when. I looked at him. He avoided my eyes. I asked where. He said, "We'll figure it out." That was the moment. The exact moment. When I understood. I was no longer welcome in my own life. I nodded. And that surprised him. Because he expected resistance. Because he expected emotion. Because he expected drama. He didn't get any. He got agreement. That made him comfortable. Comfortable people become careless. He began making jokes about my age. Light ones. Casual ones. In front of others. He laughed. They laughed. I smiled. But I remembered. He once said, "You should take it easy now." Easy. Like I was done. Like I was finished. Like I was in the way. He began setting deadlines. Not for projects. For me. He'd say, "Soon. Not much longer. We'll handle it." Handle what? Me. He stopped knocking on my door. He stopped waiting. He entered. He checked. He commented. He adjusted. I was no longer private. I was managed. He rearranged my room without asking. Removed things. Changed things. He said it was for space. For simplicity. It was for erasure. He was making me smaller. Not physically. Existentially. One afternoon he said, "You're lucky to have me." He didn't mean it kindly. He meant it as leverage. I smiled. And that bothered him. Because gratitude without submission confuses people. He expected thanks. He got neutrality. He began to test limits. Tone. Attitude. Boundaries. He spoke more sharply. More directly. More dismissively. I let him. Because every time he pushed, he showed me more of who he was. And I needed to see him clearly. He once said, "You wouldn't manage without me." I looked at him and said, "Maybe." He laughed. But his eyes didn't. Because something in my voice had changed. Not louder. Deeper. And people who build power on weakness fear strength, even quiet strength. He began watching me. Closely. When I left. When I returned. Who I spoke to. What I did. He didn't hide it. He didn't need to. He thought he owned the space. And he almost did. He became territorial. About rooms. About drawers. About areas. He marked space like an animal. Not consciously. Instinctively. Because when someone is afraid of losing control, they tighten it. He was afraid. I could see it. In his jaw. In his tone. In his pace. He was racing. And when people race, they stumble. He didn't realize it yet. But he was already slipping. And I was already standing. Betrayal becomes unbearable when it starts calling itself kindness. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. He used tone, timing, silence, the tools of people who want control without fingerprints. He began speaking to others about me as if I wasn't present. Doctors, advisors, visitors. He'd say, "He forgets things. He gets confused. He needs help." And he'd smile. I didn't correct him. Because correcting him would have warned him. And I didn't want him warned. He scheduled appointments without telling me. Then reminded me at the last minute. "We're leaving in 10. Not asked. Not suggested. Decided. I went. Because I wanted to see. And what I saw was careful. Subtle. Strategic. He didn't say I was incapable. He implied it. He didn't say I was weak. He suggested it. He didn't say I was dependent. He demonstrated it. That's how you build a narrative. And narratives become evidence. He began pushing me into smaller spaces. "Use this room. Stay here. It's easier." He reduced my footprint. My presence. My influence. I let him. Because shrinking can be tactical. He began controlling information. He intercepted mail. He answered calls. He filtered messages. He said it was for convenience. It was for isolation. Isolation makes people easier to move. He once said, "I already talked to them for you." I asked who. He said, "Everyone," and didn't explain. That's when I knew he was speaking for me. Not representing me. Replacing me. He started referring to decisions as already done. He'd say, "We took care of it." Who is we? He never answered that. He didn't need to. Because I was no longer part of it. One afternoon, I came home and found my things in boxes. Not neatly. Not carefully. Just packed. He said, "I thought it would be easier." Easier for who? I asked where they were going. He said, "We'll figure it out." That phrase again. Always vague. Always future. Always not now. He avoided my eyes when he said it. Because he knew. He knew he was pushing too far. And that meant he was close. He began speaking to me like a problem to be solved. Not a person. Not family. A task. He'd say, "We need to handle you." Not cruel. Efficient. That's worse. He invited people over and didn't introduce me. He didn't include me. He didn't acknowledge me. I'd sit, quiet, invisible, and I let it happen. Because humiliation can be useful. It makes people reckless. He began telling stories about me. Exaggerated, edited, convenient. He framed me as forgetful, as slow, as outdated. He laughed when he did it. Others laughed. I smiled. But I memorized. He once said, "He doesn't really need to be here." Right in front of me. Like I was furniture. Like I was temporary. I didn't respond. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. And discomfort reveals intention. He became bolder. More open. Less careful. He spoke about timelines. About next steps. About transitions. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. I could feel the push. He was trying to move me. Not physically. Legally. Emotionally. Socially. He was preparing the ground. He was planting stories. He was shaping opinions. He was building support. That's how you remove someone without touching them. You make the world believe they're already gone. He started saying, "It's for your own good." That sentence is always a lie. He began pushing paperwork again. Casual. Quick. Just sign. Routine. Standard. I signed. Not because I trusted him. Because I wanted to see how far he'd go. And he went far. He stopped asking entirely. He told. He instructed. He directed. He managed. He walked into my room without knocking. He moved things without asking. He commented on my habits. He corrected my choices. I was no longer an adult. I was a liability. He once said, "You can't live like this forever." I said, "No one can." He didn't like that. Because people who want power don't like reminders of equality. He began making arrangements. I could feel it. The pace. The urgency. The energy. He was in motion. And motion without transparency is usually escape. He was building a path. Without me. He stopped pretending. That's when betrayal becomes obvious. When the mask drops. When the tone changes. When patience disappears. He was no longer careful with me. He was efficient. And efficiency has no emotion. One night, I overheard him again. On the phone. Whispering. Urgent. He said, "It's almost done." He said, "He won't fight." He said, "He doesn't even know." I closed my door. And I smiled. Because he was wrong. He was wrong about one thing. I knew. And knowing changes everything. He thought I was weak. He thought I was slow. He thought I was confused. He thought I was dependent. He thought I was afraid. He was wrong. I was calm. And calm is dangerous. Because calm doesn't rush. Calm doesn't warn. Calm doesn't argue. Calm waits. And I was done waiting. Betrayal loses its power the moment you stop reacting and start deciding. The night I heard him say, "He won't fight," something settled inside me. Not anger. Not fear. Precision. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. It's organized. I didn't confront him. I didn't change. I didn't reveal anything. I became exactly what he believed I was. Quiet. Passive. Unaware. That's the safest mask you can wear. I started waking earlier. Not to avoid him. To think. To plan. To map. I made lists. Not on paper. In my head. Names. Dates. Patterns. Connections. Every person he spoke to. Every place he went. Every habit he had. When you live with someone, you learn their rhythms. Their weaknesses. Their blind spots. And he had many. He was careful in public. Lazy at home. He locked doors but left screens open. He guarded files but forgot conversations. He hid plans but revealed urgency. Urgency is information. He was rushing, which meant he was cutting corners. I let him see me struggling. I asked small questions, repeated things, moved slower, hesitated, not enough to be obvious, enough to be convincing. He believed it. He leaned in. He took more control. And every time he took more, he showed more. I started asking about things he didn't want to explain. Casually. Innocently. What's that? Who's that? Why? He answered vaguely. Defensively. Impatiently. Good. Defensiveness means pressure. Pressure means cracks. I noticed the people he avoided. The calls he stepped outside for. The documents he hid. The meetings he scheduled when I wasn't home. That's where the truth lives. In avoidance. I made quiet calls. To old contacts. To people who owed me favors. To people he didn't know existed. I didn't mention him. I didn't mention the house. I asked general questions. About property. About transfers. About trusts. About mistakes. And people talked. They always do. Because everyone likes to feel useful. And everyone knows something. I learned how things are done. And how they're undone. I learned the difference between legal and legitimate. I learned where shortcuts leave trails. And he had taken shortcuts. Many of them. I smiled. Because shortcuts are easy to take. And easy to trip on. He continued treating me like furniture. Like a problem. Like a phase. He grew more confident. More dismissive. More relaxed. That's what power does. It makes people sloppy. He stopped checking. Stopped hiding. Stopped worrying. He thought I was done. He thought I was finished. He thought I was defeated. He was wrong. I began leaving the house more. Not randomly. Strategically. I wanted him to feel alone. In control. Unwatched. He filled the space. He brought people in. He talked louder. He planned openly. He assumed privacy. He got comfortable. Comfortable people confess without knowing it. I overheard more. Learned more. Connected more. And every piece fit. He had built his plan on my silence. He hadn't accounted for my memory. He once said, "You don't need to worry about any of this." I nodded. And wrote it down in my head. He once said, "It's already taken care of." I nodded. And stored it. He once said, "You signed." I smiled. And remembered when. Because signatures tell stories. And stories can be rewritten. I found copies. Not where he thought. Not where he hid them. Where he forgot them. In the places people don't guard. Because they don't think anyone is looking. I didn't take them. I photographed them. Then put them back. Exactly. Because disappearing things create questions. And questions create caution. I didn't want caution. I wanted confidence. He became bolder. Started talking about after. After I move. After it's done. After he's in charge. He didn't realize he was speaking in the future tense to someone who was still present. That's dangerous. Because it assumes permission. He invited people over. Discussed plans. Timelines. Finances. Right in front of me. Like I was invisible. I let him. Because invisibility is a powerful position. You see everything. He started counting. Days. Weeks. Deadlines. He didn't hide it. Because he didn't think he needed to. He was wrong. I began aligning my own deadlines. Not with his. Against his. I prepared quietly. Organized. Secured. Positioned. No drama. No movement. No noise. Because noise attracts attention. And attention is the enemy of strategy. He was building a path to push me out. I was building a wall he couldn't see. And when he finally tried to move me, he was going to hit it hard. Betrayal underestimates patience. That's the first mistake. I started contacting people he didn't expect. Not loudly. Not accusingly. Casually. Conversations that sounded incidental. Small talk. But every word had purpose. I asked questions about procedures, about timelines, about legal formalities. I pretended ignorance. I let people explain things slowly, in detail. The things he assumed I didn't notice, I noted. Every nuance, every hint, every pause. He thought knowledge was one-sided, that only he had access, that only he understood the networks, that only he controlled the flow. He was wrong. People remember kindness. People remember trust. I had that stored. Old contacts remembered me. They shared quietly. They listened carefully. They advised subtly. And they reminded me of things I had long forgotten. Advantages I could claim. Loopholes. Oversights. Weak points in his narrative. He had rushed. He had overextended. He had assumed he had time. And he hadn't. I didn't confront him. I didn't threaten him. I waited. I aligned. I collected. He started moving faster, making decisions, changing arrangements, signing papers. Everything he touched left a trace. Every shortcut became a record. Every assumption became leverage. I began cataloging it all. Not emotionally, not angrily, rationally, step by step, action by action. The house, the accounts, the mail, the documents, the contacts, every single thing that defined ownership, control, and authority. He once said, "I've got this handled." I smiled quietly, because handled leaves fingerprints, and fingerprints matter. I reviewed old documents, old agreements, the arrangements we had made, the signatures, the timelines, the promises. Every one of them was a stone in the foundation I had built for him, and one day those stones would become barriers for him. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not a word. He thought he was moving unobserved. He thought he was free. That confidence made him sloppy. That sloppiness became my opportunity. I reached out quietly to the lawyers I had known for decades. Simple calls. Not confrontational. Just clarifications. Can you confirm this? Would this be enforceable? What about that clause? Every answer added pieces to my strategy. Every minor detail strengthened my position. Meanwhile, he kept trying to isolate me. He thought he was succeeding. He created an illusion of control. He moved documents, shifted furniture, blocked access, filtered messages. He assumed silence meant compliance. It didn't. It gave me visibility. I began planning my timing. Not a fight. Not a confrontation. A sequence. Step by step. When to act. How to act. How to reveal. How to let the momentum build without him realizing the shift until it was too late. He still came home confident. He still laughed. He still assumed I was watching passively. I was. But watching has power. Watching teaches you patience. Watching lets you see the cracks. And cracks grow into openings. I discovered his patterns. The times he left things unattended. The moments he underestimated who I was. Every oversight became a point of leverage. Every assumption became a weakness. One night, he bragged to a friend about taking care of everything. I smiled. Because taking care of everything loudly announces what you think is hidden. I did nothing in front of him. No reaction. Just a nod. Come. Patient. Observing. That's how you make people overreach. That's how you make their confidence blind. The first invisible countermove came quietly. I submitted paperwork he hadn't expected. Small filings, notices, confirmations. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confrontational. Just procedural steps in places he assumed I would never touch. And those steps disrupted him. Not immediately, but soon. He noticed the delays, the questions, the calls he hadn't anticipated. And then, for the first time, uncertainty crept into his tone. Subtle, short, hesitant. I didn't push. I didn't accelerate. I waited. Let him stew. Let him wonder. Let him feel the edge. Because when someone believes they have already won, the smallest disruption feels like chaos. And I was just beginning. Betrayal can only thrive where observation is absent. He was confident. Too confident. Every step he took was measured. Every word he spoke assumed my passivity. But I had stopped being passive. Quietly, steadily, I became the observer he forgot existed. I began timing his actions, tracking documents, following the flow of his contacts without him knowing. Small things, minor adjustments, innocuous conversations that revealed patterns. He thought he was invisible. That was his mistake. One morning, I noticed a form on the table. Something official. Something that affected the house. He had left it unsigned by accident. Or perhaps deliberately, thinking I would ignore it. I didn't touch it. I photographed it. I recorded the date. Every word. Every signature line. Every blank. This was the first tangible piece of leverage. He continued with his confident stride. He boasted about timelines, deadlines, handling everything, and how quickly things would be resolved. I nodded along, smiled, observed, learned, catalogued. He began making small missteps, not dramatic, not obvious, but enough. A call I overheard, a note he left unsecured, a file misfiled, a contractor misinformed. Small, human errors. Confidence makes errors. Observation turns errors into advantage. I began contacting people on my side quietly. Old attorneys, trusted advisors, professionals he assumed I had no access to. Casual, innocent inquiries. Just checking a detail. Want to make sure this is accurate. Could you clarify this point? They told me things he didn't know I would ask. Things that exposed gaps in his knowledge. Mistakes in procedure. Shortcuts he had assumed were invisible. I smiled quietly.